is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Unlike this chapter, which is giving us tons of rewards.
Woo! This is an exciting chapter. We are not at Death Gates, but the anticipation of Death Gates is just lurking around every little thing that happens. So, you know.
I mean, this is the Jordan Lanch. This is the end. Basically, like, everything from here on out to me is exciting. For the rest of this book. Like, every chapter is interesting. Every chapter is fun. This is really the good part of Knife of Dreams, right? Like, the beginning stuff has been entertaining and fun. Like, we've enjoyed that. But, like, it is... The structure of Jordan's books is the second half is almost always more exciting than the first half. And so... And this one, I find that to be exceptionally true because, like we said, this book is a conclusion of like 3 books of plot lines.
Right, we're coming off the slog. It took us half a book to fully shake the slog.
Yeah.
And now everything that the slog was is coming together to give us this payoff. And it's such a bittersweet payoff because it is the end of the Jordan of the series. We're in the last half of the last book that Robert Jordan wrote. So this is the sweetest, bitterest, like it's like going back to an empty road and Eye of the World levels of like emotional whiplash to be like savoring this, like in this, here we go, here's what he had left to give when he knew that this was gonna be the end.
I don't know how much he knew this was going to be the end of the time he was writing it.
I think he suspected that he might not get to the next one because he had a lot of work ready to go. Like, even before, because...
Yeah, but a lot of that was happening but like, after he finished this book, I feel like.
Yeah, but, like, it can't have all been. I don't know. It's just in my head. I'm like, he had to have known that it was possible.
Honestly, I truly believe, with all of my heart, that Jordan didn't think it was that serious until it was very serious. I thought he, like we all do, thought he was going to live quite a bit longer, assumed he would beat it, and lived his life like he was going to beat the disease. And until it became something that was obviously very much making him ill to the point where he couldn't function anymore, I think he was going off the assumption he was going to finish these books himself. And just my understanding is that, like, it just... The communication and the people who were close to him, and, like... Some of that, I'm sure, is he didn't let it on, right? To how bad it was. But it seems like he was quite shocked. Like, he really, even with the last few months, was saying things like, I'm just a little sick, I'm gonna rest, I'm gonna get better, and I'll be back to writing.
Oh, yeah, Salman Asai saying the timeline was 2005, Knife of Dreams was released in 2006, was the public announcement of the diagnosis.
Right.
So, yeah, I was very, very, very loosely tied in to what was happening at the time. I was just barely starting my explorations into like, oh, there's this thing called Dragon Mount where I can keep up with news. Like, it was right around then that I was first peeking into it, and then it was like, oh, he's sick. This is bad. But I wasn't like tapped into the community, and I just really didn't know the vibe. I just was like,
yeah, 2005 the book was released. Sickness was announced in 2006.
This was like around the time that I was learning about how Carl Sagan died. Like, he died in the 90s, but this was around the time that I was going through the arc of discovering Carl Sagan and then learning that when he had died. And then, like, I come off of that into, like, and now Robert Jordan's dying. And I was just like, how fucking dare? How fucking dare these amazing writers fucking die before their time for stupid, rare diseases? Like, in my mind, Robert Jordan and Carl Sagan are paired for that reason.
Sure. They're also some of the 2 probably best, most influential writers. Because, like, we were just talking about all the YouTubers who we watch on to do science communication, and 99% of them, I'm sure, 100% of them have watched Carl Sagan and are modeling some of what they do off of him.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, he is one of the original popular science communicators.
Oh my god, he's such a cool dude. I've seriously considered getting a quote from him tattooed on my body. Like, Robert Jordan currently is the only person with words etched into my skin, but like Carl Sagan is on the list of people that might otherwise get on there too. Like, fucking hell. Stupid diseases. They both died of rare, stupid diseases.
Yeah.
It's really, like... Don't be a smart, awesome person. You'll die.
I've got news. You'll still die even if you're not a smart, awesome person.
No.
No. Yes. All right. Just like Rand here assumes he's going to die at the end of the last battle.
He also still is holding out a weird hope. He just has to figure out how to die to live or whatever, how to live by dying. He still is holding on to this little bit of hope.
Meanwhile, this whole chapter is about how he will live because he's seeing his new body, right?
He's looking at Olivia thinking somehow mysterious magic. Meanwhile, in his head, somehow mysterious magic. All right. So we haven't had a read in from you in a minute.
No, well, we've been with Elaine for quite some time, so
Yeah.
it's been a lot of Elaine read-ins. This is chapter 18, News for the Dragon, and our symbol is the dragon.
In a box.
In a box. In fairness, he's broken out of the box in the symbol.
True. This is an outside the box dragon.
It is an outside the box dragon. But he was in the box, which is very important to remember.
The box is still lingering in his mind.
Uh-huh. And News for the Dragon, that's mostly Logain showing up with news.
Yeah, Logain is the one really bringing a big satchel of news. Ethan comes in and interrupts multiple times with different things, because we've got the Ogier arriving, we've got Logain arriving, and then we've got the Ogier arriving. So it's like there's lots of things coming to the dragon, but yeah, the news is from Logain.
Enough, Loial, Rand said firmly, thumbing tobacco into his short-stemmed pipe from a goatskin pouch. It was Terran leaf with a slightly oily taste from the curing, but that was all that was to be had. Thunder rolled overhead, slow and ponderous. You'll talk me hoarse with all these questions. They were seated at a long table in one of the larger rooms in Lord Algarin's manor house, the remains of the midday meal pushed down to one end. The servants were old for the most part, and slower moving than ever since Algarin left for the Black Tower. The rain pouring down outside seemed to be slackening, though strong gusts of wind still pelted the windows with raindrops hard enough to rattle the glass in the 6 yellow-painted casements. Many of those panels held bubbles. Some distorted what lay outside, almost beyond recognition. The table and chairs were simply carved, no more elaborate than might be found in many farmhouses, and the yellow cornices beneath the high, beam ceilings little more so. The 2 fireplaces at either end of the room were broad and tall, but of plain stone, and the... I don't know that word. Andirons?
They say andirons in the audiobook, but where is it?
Oh, there's no space in my book. It says the stone and irons and fire tools stirred. 2 fireplaces at either end of the room were broad and tall, but of plain stone. The irons and fire tools. Irons must be one word.
Andirons and fire tools are both one word in my book.
Yeah.
Huh.
And iron, a support to hold logs in an open fireplace. It's the metal grate.
Oh, is that what that thing is? I just thought it was a fire grate. Well, that's a...
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Today
today we learned.
Sound off in the comments if you also did not know what an andiron was.
The 2 fireplaces at either end of the room were broad and tall, but of plain stone. The andirons and fire tools, sturdy wrought iron and simple. Lord or no, Algarin was far from wealthy. Tucking the tobacco pouch into his pocket, Rand strolled to one of the fireplaces and used a small brass tongs from the mantel to lift a burning sliver of oak for lighting his pipe. He hoped no one thought that strange. He avoided channeling any more than absolutely necessary, especially if anyone else was present. The dizziness that hit him when he did was difficult to conceal, but no one had mentioned it so far. A gust of wind brought a squeaking as though tree branches had scraped across the window panes. Imagination. The nearest trees were beyond the hills, more than half a mile away.
Was that imagination? Or was it the dark one?
I wonder, the squeaking across the window? Was that someone...
It sounds poltergeisty to me.
Yeah.
It sounds really haunted, and I feel like fades in the night are probably the source of a lot of like poltergeist ghost story kind of things, you know? That just seems like one of those things where it's like the something weird went bump in the night and it turns out it was actually shadow spawn, and like that's what it feels like to me.
Right, because we know there's a shadow spawn attack coming, so it feels like this is related to that.
Like a fade just like showed up like out of the woods and just like peered in the window and then like jumped away, and like its little like toenails like scratched on the window as it flew away or something, you know?
Or like a Drakkar.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just like I have such a hard time believing that wasn't a flying shadow spawn pushing off from the house after doing some recon.
I think it's important to talk about Lord Algarin, right? Because we see him quite a bit later on, right? He left to go to the Black Tower in chapter 18. So he leaves.
This is chapter 18.
This is chapter 18. So he has just left, right? Like, he lets them stay at their manor house and then leaves to go to the Black Tower.
Yep. And then when he's there, he is one of Loghain's most stalwart advocates and is there for the whole Androl plot. Algarin is a staunch ally, and part of how you know you can trust him is because of the fact that he let Rance stay in his manor and all his servants were great and so on and so forth.
And he goes by the name Amarin in the Black Tower.
Who is his brother. Who Cadsuane helped to gentle and then kept alive for 10 years through basically therapy. And Algarin has always respected her and appreciated her for what she did for his brother. So he knew he had the spark, the ability to learn. Not the spark. He knew he had the ability to learn. Because of that, he takes his brother's name. He serves in his brother's place because his brother was just born a little too early to serve in the last battle. And it's just all very heroic.
I also noticed the description of the glass and the casements that, I don't know if this is relevant, but many of the panes held bubbles. Some distorted what lay outside almost beyond recognition. And I couldn't help but think of, right, bubbles of evil. Distorting the pattern.
I love that. Because I was thinking, like, windows are always allegories for, like, the soul or the mind, the inner space. Rand is clearly having a very distorted inner mind and soul space. He's obviously, like, there's multiple people bouncing around in his soul. Like, everything is very complicated. So I was seeing it all in terms of that. And, like, you know, Rand's mind is bubbled beyond the point of comprehension. But you're right, literally bubbles of evil. This is an allegory for what is happening.
Distorting the pattern beyond recognition.
And Varen even mentions it happening, like, in this chapter. She's like, you know that, like, the pattern is seriously weakening, and, like, effectively she says bubbles of evil are becoming not even necessarily evil because there's just so many different weird things happening. Like, ooh, I like that. I think that he's doing a lot with those bubbles in glass.
I do. Yeah. So then we get, what I love is just the following bit is Loial and Rand interacting, which is just Loial being like, would you brag a little bit, just a little bit about what you've done? And Rand being like, what? I'm not really doing anything important.
You're saving the world, my dude. Please tell me about how it feels to save the world.
It's also like, you and I are reading this book and we're like, we love this. And Rand's like, nah, it's not that exciting. You know, we were talking about how meta this is.
Rand is suffering, you know? Rand is suffering and having a terrible time, and we're all just like, yeah, hurt him more!
That's a good point. He's like, I don't want to talk about my trauma, and we're like, get in the details.
Exactly. We are the worst. As we were saying before we went live with this, like, Robert Jordan is doing a lot of talking to us in this chapter. He is addressing us, the audience, directly. And, like, anytime Loial is talking to Rand, I feel like his book is happening. Yeah, about his book, like, literally.
Because we are literally reading the book that Loial is writing, right? That's sort of the in-world conception here. And then Loial, of course, being the author, means that Jordan sort of uses Loial sometimes, I think, to say his own words, because Loial is the author of these books in the same way that Jordan is the author of these books.
Right. But yeah, the main characters presumably would have a bit of an issue with their authors if they had the ability to tell them what they thought, you know, directly.
Yeah, the cleansing. You two linked and then channeled and then fell asleep. It's like, yeah, we talked about the cleansing a little bit longer than that. How long was the episode that you put together about the cleansing?
The cleansing supercut came in at like 5 hours and change.
Yeah. So we had nothing to say. Yeah, Rand channeled for a while and everybody else was off fighting. That's what happened there.
I mean, in fairness, Rand is very little of that.
Yeah, that's true.
5 hours.
That's true.
Most of it is all these other POVs of people experiencing it, and every now and then it checks in. Like, we probably talked about Rand for like 30 minutes of that, tops, total.
Because he's just sitting there channeling motionless. Right? There's some physical reaction that we talked about, but not a lot.
Not a lot. But unlike Robert Jordan, Loial is very tentatively beginning his very first beard and mustaches.
Yeah.
Whereas Robert Jordan was writing that with a full-on, like, manly man's.
I mean,
like,
at some point he had to grow his first beard. It might not have been that successful.
Wispy whiskers.
Yeah. I'll be honest though, I bet Jordan was pretty hairy even as a kid.
He had a very full beard as an adult, so.
And he probably had to shave in the military, so he probably came out of the military a little bit older, being able to grow his first beard.
Right. Getting an artificial, not head start, but an artificial sense of baseline. That would be logical to me as a person with only errant face hairs who were not authorized or called for.
Next thing, we've got a little bit about Nynaeve here.
Yeah, Nynaeve and Olivia.
Yeah. And they're decked to the nines, right? She's got all of her net on. She's got all the jewelry on. Ready to fight. A little bit about the maidens. Don't know how much you wanted to say about that.
I assumed that if there was something interesting, you would have looked them up.
Well, just that there's Shido in the group. I think that's interesting that he's continuing. The maidens are still regarding him as Shido. Even though he's been, and we talked about this a little bit, like, remember the last time he abandoned them? They beat the shit out of him. Now he's been gone for however long, and they're just happy to be guarding him again, I guess.
But they're also mad at him. Well, I think the thing was that they beat him for sneaking away. And this last time he actually told them, I need to leave you behind for reasons, and I will call for you when I'm ready. And they're angry over how long that took. But at least he did it not as a secret. So there's that. But yeah, I don't remember Harlan and Anila doing anything particularly interesting. They're just maidens that exist and presumably live or die at some point. But Olivia's just there being Olivia. And I like her. She's just like this one Swiss guard or like whatever that just is following Rand around. Just like completely one woman army protecting him in her mind.
So of those two maidens, Anila is one of those, has been in the background of the maidens. Like, she's been everywhere, right? She's just one of the maidens in all of the lists. Like, I'm looking through her page, and it's Adolin, Anila, and other maidens. Aiden, Anila, and other maidens. Adolin, Anila. It's Sulin, Anila, and other maidens. And it's just like this list of her in these groups of maidens, but she doesn't do anything on her own. And then the only thing that her and Harlan do from now on is they're basically in the fight in the next chapter.
Right, because they're still with Rand when the attack happens.
But that's the last mention of them.
Oh, they get dropped in the Sanderson books?
Yep.
Well, they would have done some cool heroic battle death shit in the last battle if they hadn't gotten dropped by the Sanderson transition.
So Harlan guards Rand's rooms in Lord of Chaos once, and then she's in Knife of Dreams 19 and 20. Or 18 and 19. So, yeah, pretty just maidens. Very generic maiden.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it is interesting that he's still got Shido maidens who are, being accepted and also are accepting him. And then because we dared to think about women using weapons, we have to think about the list.
Right.
And
Moraine and everybody, we go through the list. And then we have to think about how big Min's eyes are.
Well, okay. Before that, we should point out that we're getting another sense of Rand is crazy, right? Because we were talking about this again before we turned the recording on. This is a chapter where Robert Jordan looks dead at the audience and says, "Can you tell that this man is insane?" Because he has this section here. Sometimes he woke in the middle of the night muttering that list, with men holding him and murmuring to him as if soothing a child. He always told her he was all right and wanted to go back to sleep, yet after he closed his eyes, he did not sleep until the list had been completed. Sometimes Luce Theron chanted it with him. Those are not the thoughts of a sane man. That is an intense trauma response with augmented magic insanity. How much more plainly can he spell it out for us?
The kids are not all right.
This kid is not all right.
No.
This kid has a very old man in his head, and neither of them are all right.
Meanwhile, Min is trying to devour everything she can about the last battle, trying to save his life, right? She's reading everything that Herod Fell wrote. She's consuming his books, or, wrote and also all of his books that he owned.
Right. His personal library, not just his published works. Yeah. Yeah. And like in between all of that, she's sleeping. And then now and then she wakes up in the middle of the night to hear Rand like having a fucking meltdown, panic attack nightmare, and like has to try to like wake him up and like soothe him out of it so that he can like attempt to go back to sleep. And yeah, no wonder she's just becoming like a postdoc on postdoc on postdoc multi-class scholar, And again, this is where my main argument for Min is not a sexy lamp comes in, because she is reading all this high level philosophical academic stuff by day and attempting to help Rand get out of his trauma loops at night. Like, this is not sexy lamp behavior. It's just not.
And I do say, I've got a problem with the fandom and the way they treat Min, right? Everyone says that, like, the fate of the world is on her dump truck ass. But if you read the text, it's really in her cleavage.
That is not an inaccurate criticism. Yeah.
Because Jordan never once mentions Min's ass. That is entirely an invention of the fandom. He does mention her cleavage quite a few times.
That is extremely true. Jordan was generally not an ass man.
No, he's definitely a boob guy.
But,
yeah,
like, he's a boob guy.
Yeah, he's a boob guy. But here, where her creamy silk blouse showed a touch of cleavage and her big dark eyes, right? Big eyes right after cleavage. Mm-hmm. We know we all remember my theory when he says big eyes, what he's actually meaning is big boobs.
Yes, even though he literally already said big boobs, literally.
Right. But he always does that. He always says big boobs and big eyes. They always go together on his characters.
Yeah, this does support that.
And then he just says big eyes and you know what he's talking about. It's, all squares are a rectangle, right? All girls with big eyes also have big boobs in Robert Jordan's world. And so what does Rand do when he sees a very attractive woman who he enjoys sleeping with? He thumbs his ear.
Because Luce Theron habit thing.
Because Rand is Louis Theron. And he's developing his mannerisms.
Yeah, but keep telling yourself that it's just Luce Theron taking over.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. So this is where it's really interesting, just combo of Rand is becoming Louis Theron. He's doing it in a way that's very involuntary, and it's only when he leans into it that I feel like Rand becomes who he's supposed to be.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lesson repeated over and over in Wheel of Time, and he spells it out directly. Is like, fighting the wheel does nothing except make your path difficult. You lean in and you start to get some amount of agency within the thing that you were going to do either way. Like, that's it. That's all you get. But yeah, Rand is still very much not accepting it yet, and so he's really struggling to manage his emotions at this point.
And all of that's happening in his head, right? Basically, all that's happened right now is Loial's been complaining about how Rand won't give him details.
Yeah, and Rand is like sort of looking around for something else to think about, and is looking at Min being like, Min.
I like my Min.
Which, like, I like Min too.
So he says basically, don't ask, or Min says, don't ask him, ask Codswain and Varen. They're much more willing to talk.
To which Varen and Cadswain both do very, like, sitcom looks to camera, like, looks to Loial.
Like, wait, what? No.
Absolutely not.
That's two people who are incredibly well known for their secrecy, who have more secrets between them than I think almost any other pair of Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Varen will spin you a pretty tale about this scarf that looks super lumpy, but is actually a compulsion weave. And Cadswain will just embroider your ass.
It's not comfortable. She doesn't use anesthetic.
No.
And then what has to be one of the greatest meta lines in all of these books is when Loial looks down and it says, "My book won't be very good without the details."
Laughing in 15 books.
Oh my god. Yeah, and it's just like on book 11 of this series, you know, just
Loial.
yeah. The level of
Robert
detail.
Jordan's like, I know. I see that page count.
Yes.
I know how many words I've written. Yes, I know.
So that as a meta comment is just got to be one of the funniest like wall breakers in this entire chapter.
It's fantastic. It's just so good. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you for seeing us. Thank you for acknowledging. Thank you for acknowledging us. That was good. We see you. Good. We appreciate you.
And we appreciate that you appreciate us. Appreciating your details, we think.
For the most part. Except when they're completely wrong and we spend hours railing on them.
I bet he would go back and be like, I would revise some of these things if he could. No author thinks their work is perfect.
Yeah. I cannot imagine such an inquisitive mind would not utterly love to revise stuff endlessly and make it more perfect forever. That seems like the kind of thing such a man would do with infinite time. Why couldn't he have been a vampire? He could have just lived forever.
So, and of course, Loial brings up Matt and Perrin, which creates the swirling colors in Rand's head. And so we get a little quick time sync / check-in with those two, right? So we check in with Matt, and he's still with a small dark woman, right? We know is Tuon, so he hasn't left her yet. And they're arguing, of course. And Perrin is with the Seanchan.
Yes, he's in some planning meeting with Tylee and Mishima. We don't know which meeting exactly, but it doesn't matter. He's just in the planning phase.
Right.
Because
this is pre-rescue.
Right yeah. Yes, that's what matters. This is before Tuon leaves and before Fail is rescued.
I'm kind of shocked Rand doesn't recognize the garments the Seanchan are wearing.
I was wondering about that, but maybe it's just that they're from such a different unit of the arm. No, he's destroyed all rank and file.
Yeah, but in fairness, from a distance with lightning.
He saw a lot of the bodies close up.
Yeah. No, I do think that's a bit of a plot hole. I would expect him to be like, why is Perrin meeting with Seanchan? Like, I would expect him to.
Yeah, Tuon, I understand him not understanding her fashion as being Seanchan, but like Tylee and Mishima are exactly the kind of people that Rand has seen blackened and burnt over and over again.
In military uniform, right?
Yeah.
That's one where I kind of looked at that and went, Rand, maybe he's just seeing glimpses and kind of ignoring it, right?
Well, he does say that he allows the images to fully form this time because he's gotten good at suppressing them now. So I think it's just a plot hole.
Sam and Asai's pointing out that, like, the Seanchan are basically wearing armor that would be recognizable from the Age of Legends, and Rand's never...
Yeah, which I find so hard to believe. Like, why, like, really? You've never changed your design?
I imagine it was in a book recreated. It was like someone recreating now, going back and being like, you know what's really great? The Roman phalanx. Let's recreate their armor.
Right, which, like, wouldn't work in modern warfare.
Well, no, but...
So...
Yeah, that's the other thing they say about, they're like, oh yeah, the Seanchan, they change their tactics every time they lose until they get it right. And I'm like, really? Because it seems like they don't change at all. They're so hidebound and tradition-bound that seems the opposite.
Their helmets haven't changed in 3,000 years.
Right. It seems like they're not exactly the most...
2,000 years or however long since, they founded it and found the design in a book and decided to recreate it or whatever. But, like, still, like, those are some old-ass designs. And it's like, yeah, it's like if you dug up, like, ancient Greek armor and we're like, you know what? We should design our new military armor based on this. Like, what?
I mean, honestly, the analog to me is the Third Reich, right? Because you have, why was it the Third Reich?
Sure. There was a second and a first.
But he was saying basically the First Reich was like back in Roman days, and he's inheriting the...
We're inheriting the Roman Empire, basically.
We're inheriting the Roman Empire. We are the Roman Empire just exerting itself. And that is kind of... And the Seanchan very much is in that headspace. We are the Arthur Hawkwing Empire re-exerting itself, and the Arthur Hawkwing Empire was the Age of Legends inheriting, that's who inherited the title, the crown from the Age of Legends, and who should rule. They're wrong, don't get me wrong. Like, their history is all fucked up, and...
But that's the parallel, yeah.
Right. And their history is corrupted by Shamael.
They've recycled, like, eagle iconography, not body armor design. That's
fair,
what's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Logos are easier to recycle across the centuries.
Well, but we don't know how they're constructed. It could look like Age of Legends armor without actually being the same.
You'd think Age of Legends armor would have been really good, but maybe.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe that's the thing, is it's like it was peak technology, so there's just like no improving on it with lesser equipment. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a historical armor knowing person, really. I just like listening to people rant about it every now and then. So
here's a theory. Age of Legends armor, it didn't matter as much how effective it was. It just had to look cool because it was like had channeling woven through it because it was all Terran and shit. So it was actually pretty ineffective armor, mostly for design.
Oh.
And then the Seanchan are copying like the design of it, and that's why you get these really terrible insect-looking armor that's actually not very good for you to use, because they don't have any of the magical enhancements that they had back in Age of Legends.
Yeah, they never really mention how effective the Seanchan armor is. I could totally see that. It was just whatever was in fashion that year of the war.
Right.
Like, from like the runway, fashion designer people, because it's all like threaded through with Quendia or whatever, so it doesn't matter. But then, yeah, they're like, oh, no, if the insectile helmet is how the Age of Legends war was won, and so that's how we know that this is like the power symbols, and triangles preserve bodies because they channel electricity and shit, and all of that, like, weird conspiracy Seanchan stuff on their History Channel,
Yep.
Like,
yep, totally.
Yeah, I like it.
Ancient channelers built the pyramids.
Yeah. It was actually people from
totally.
the Age of Legends who didn't die that built the pyramids. They just
okay.
ascended because the pyramid shaped channels the ley lines of the one power that used to exist. I swear.
Ley lines? Okay.
the standing flows. That's the word for it.
And then the next paragraph I want to talk about has to be the next couple paragraphs are really the explanation for how Rand lives after the last battle.
All right, take it away.
I'm going to read it because I feel like this stuff is so good and so relevant to the questions that we have in the last battle, right?
Yeah.
Another image was floating in his head, a man's face, and his breath caught. For the first time, it came without any dizziness. For the first time, he could see it clearly in the moments before it vanished. A blue-eyed man with a square chin, perhaps a few years older than himself. Or rather, he saw it clearly for the first time in a long while. It was the face of the stranger who had saved his life in Shadar Logoth when he fought with Samael. Worse, he was aware of me, Lewis Theron said. He sounded sane for a change. Sometimes he did, but the madness always returned eventually. I think that's relevant to Rand. How can a face appearing in my mind be aware of me? If you don't know how do you expect me to, Rand thought. But I was aware of him as well. It had been a strange sensation, as if he were touching the other man somehow. Only not physically. A residue hung on. It seemed he only had to move a hair's breadth in any direction to touch him again. I think he saw my face, too. Talking to his voice in his head no longer seemed peculiar. In truth, it had not for quite a long time. And now? Now he could see Matt and Perrin by thinking of them, or hearing their names. And he had this other face coming to him unbidden. More than a face, apparently. What was holding conversations inside his own skull alongside that? But the man had been aware, and Rand of him. When our streams of balefire touched in Shadar Logoth, it must have created some sort of link between us. I can't think of any other explanation. That was the only time we ever met. He was using their so-called true power. It had to be that. I felt nothing. Saw nothing except his stream of balefire. And I think I'm going to stop there. There's a bunch of things I want to say about individual sentences, right?
Okay.
So when Lewis Theron, of course, right, we know this is the stranger he met. The stranger is, of course, a Shamael, right? He's like, I've only met him once. It's like, no, you met him many times, but only once since he's been resurrected.
You haven't met the Moradin body more than
right.
once.
right. And then Lewis Theron says he was aware of me. Does that mean, Shamael / Moradin is aware of me, is LTT the voice in Rand's head, or me, is he just aware of Rand?
Oh, I always assumed it was just Rand.
Okay.
I always assumed that he was referencing Rand.
Because I always assumed it was LTT saying he's aware of me, the voice in your head.
Oh, yeah,
But now, on reread, I don't think so. I think that's basically he's aware of me, that's LTT being Rand.
Yeah, that's LTT / Rand.
Yes.
Saying that. I'm seeing him, he's seeing me. Like, there's a lot of people happening on both ends, but there's only two people.
Yes.
Really in the
I don't think that Moradin is aware of a voice in Rand's head. Yes. Okay. And then this whole thing about them touching, not physically, but they only have to move a hair's breadth to touch, right? That is the body swap. That is the setup for the body swap. That's the whole point. Like, all that is them... Because remember when Nakomi says to him, yes, that's what you have to do. Just move a little bit. It's that swap that they have to do.
Is it Nakomi says that?
Nakomi only has a couple of quotes.
I don't remember Nakomi talking to Rand at all. They meet? Did Nakomi and Rand? Okay, all right.
Okay.
It's been a long time since I've gone through the last.
Nakomi appears in two places, right? We get to see her meeting with Aviendha.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Right? Then, as Rand lays dying, she appears a second time as a gray-haired woman in Aiel garb who speaks to Rand as he exits Shale Ghul.
Oh.
Among the materials Jordan left behind at his passing was a single line of instruction about a mysterious character who would appear to Rand al'Thor as he left Shale Ghul. An unknown woman says to Rand, yes, that's good, that's what you have to do.
Well, that's extremely specific.
And so to me, what is he doing at that time? He's switching bodies. He's bringing out Moradin and switching bodies with him. That's how you have to live.
And it's this kind of thing where it's like if he just moved a little bit, then...
Mm-hmm.
Like they're in some kind of like superimposed quantum state and can just switch places.
Yeah, and again, so we were talking earlier about all the physics videos we love watching, and like this the amount of physics that Jordan is putting in here, where he's literally taking these two threads, like because for him, threads, vibrating strings, right, string theory, right, like there's so much to that, and then you've got these two people, and I talked about this when we did the chapter, who are quantumly entangled, right? You have, and it's very important, he says, he was using their so-called true power. Interesting he says so-called.
I think it's the so-called true. I think it's not true, it's fucking entropy, like fuck off.
It's not true, it's just the dark one. Right. So he knows that he's realizing at that point, oh, he's using the true power balefire, and I'm using one power balefire. Our streams crossed, we're entangled, something happened there. And what I think happened is basically, because you have a paradox, right? If you're balefiring balefire, and then like, oh, well, the balefire makes it so the other balefire doesn't exist before it happened, and so you have a paradox, and the only way to resolve that is you take these two threads of the pattern, these two vibrating threads, and you make it one.
Yeah, a paradox for a paradox. It's extraordinary problems require extraordinary solutions.
And you've quantum entangled these two characters who then exist sort of in both places at once. Right.
And then when they switch at the end, one of them is like in a vessel that dies and thus is able to like exit properly and correctly and like resolve the paradox in an organic manner and just get spun out again to go through the entire process all over again against his wishes, effectively losing his bid for winning the last battle.
But if you go back and like listen to my rant when they crossed the streams about what that was doing to them, a lot of that information comes from this chapter and that paragraph specifically.
Gotcha. So that would be the episode where it actually happened?
Yes.
Okay. I'll put a link to that in the episode description as well, so that way people can easily jump there if they want to hear that rant in full.
Because remember, that's the battle in book 7.
Yes.
When Samael and Rand travel to Shadar Logoth, and the whole Lilith thing where she disappears and he turns away, and we get the most unsatisfying death of Samael, right?
Yeah.
And we're just like, yeah, all that.
But within all that is a whole rant that is based on this paragraph explaining what
happens when Rand and Moradin cross the streams.
The crossing of the streams.
He talks a little bit about how Lanfear and Shamael could track him down through the Taviran effect, but no one else has been able to do that, and no one else really could. And we know now that it's almost impossible because the pattern's all fucked up.
Yeah, I imagine that it's easier to do in dream space, which is where Ishii and Lanfear really are also pretty.
That's a good point.
High up there.
Yeah.
It's probably like dream principles are able to point you to Taviran, and it's like nobody has time for all that raw data crunching except for like really obsessed exes.
Well, that and right now it's like the dreamscape is so fucked up that
oh yeah, I mean everything's so wibbly wobbly now that even what was vaguely possible before is now totally
is
impossible.
probably completely impossible. Yeah. So I don't believe it's possible anymore to track down someone through the Taviran effect.
Yeah, it makes sense that Rand has not thought about it in that way, but yeah, I agree. It's an obsolete concern at this point.
Mm-hmm. This close to the last battle, yeah.
And then Loial's like, hey, Rand, you seem to be staring off into space for an awful long time there. Like, you having some stomach upset from bad cheese? It's just the cutest Loial thing. And then here's the thing I wanted to talk about. They talk about the food poisoning factor and how that's actually been happening. People would have died except for the presence of Ashaman and Aes Sedai to give healing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, big ol' side eye to the entire White Tower and the Yellow Aja specifically. People have been dying across this continent full of Aes Sedai for the past several centuries of food poisoning because there are not Yellow Sisters in hospitals in every town with a population of more than 10,000. Or whatever the reasonable median population would be.
Can you imagine the recruiting tool?
Fucking hell!
The yellow Aja in every city would be?
It makes me so mad. They're like, oh, it's so handy Aes Sedai were here. Sure would have sucked if they'd been around for the general population for the past, 3,000 years. But no, you have to go to the White Tower for healing, which means that no one goes to the White Tower for food poisoning. No. The only thing you can go to the White Tower for is weird lingering illnesses that someone else will pay to transport you across. It's ridiculous that this is not a normal solution.
And I also want to point out that the spoiling of the food is more of the Dark One's effect, right? He is fucking with the world more and more and more.
Well, then there's that.
And we talk a lot about battles and deaths and stuff like that, but the reality is more people die from sickness, disease, and spoiled food in wars than they do from actual battle.
That's a fact.
And here's the Dark One accelerating all of that, making all of that worse. And Rand's not helping.
Well, I mean, this is the worst kind of war because there's no front line, right?
No.
In a war where there's a battlefield versus the city, it's one thing. But when the whole world is the battlefield, every pantry is part of the war. Yeesh.
Yeesh is right, yeah.
It's but yes, I mean it is worse because of the Dark One, but it's food poisoning has always existed, and I have not heard of Aes Sedai fixing food poisoning until now in this whole ass series.
Some keepings, right? They talk about preventing food spoilage.
And dealing with intestinal parasites on refugees one time, but there's never just there's a hospital in every significant village. So that way people who happened to, eat the wrong mushrooms because they looked like the safe mushrooms, cannot die, but no, we're going to instead have only the Reds doing any kind of PR for the entire tower.
Yeah. Regional hospitals with one Aes Sedai at the head and, basic medical treatment for people who don't need healing right away. Right. Yeah. All funded by the White Tower.
Yeah, totally. And then recruiting from women who want to be village wisdoms and stuff like that. And then being like, oh, you've got the extra juju. You should go back to the tower for extra training. And
But that your universal healthcare is just communism, and the Aes Sedai don't support that. They're very much capitalists with their gold. I gotta take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Okay. So Nynaeve comes over to heal Rand, and Rand thinks God, she still acts like we're gonna all just go back to Emmons Field someday. It's been so long since I left home, and she's still stuck in the past. And I'm from Nynaeve's point of view, she still hasn't come to terms with the fact that you're not all going home at the end of this. Like, she still is actively trying to come to terms with that because it's only been 2 years.
Well, and I love that her arc was going away from Rand and she felt so guilty about leaving protecting him, so she could go learn enough to then come back and protect him and heal him. And I love that her arc is basically joining him again for the cleansing and then with him for the rest of the series. Because in a way, that is why she left, right?
Yeah.
Was to protect the Two Rivers folks from Aes Sedai. And she is there by Rand to do that. And I love that she is staying very true to her original desire, her original conception of leaving the Two Rivers. And I think in a lot of ways they all have, right? Egwene wanted to go on an adventure and become powerful and do cool things, and she does that, right? Like, Perrin wanted to go home. He did that. Matt wanted to make money and have lots of promiscuous sex and, not have to go home to his dad's farm and milk cows, and he gets to do that, right? Like, they all leave for reasons, and they kind of stick with it throughout the story.
Right. Rand leaves because he has to do it to protect everyone, and he doesn't really want to, but that's what has to be done. So it makes sense that he's the one that Nynaeve is like, well, if they're all going in different directions and I literally can't be with all of them, which one needs me the most? Rand.
Right. And who needs protection from the Aes Sedai?
Right. The one who's most threatened, most put upon, most vulnerable is actually the Dragon Reborn. That's the one who most needs her out of all of them. So yeah, she levels up as hard as she can, and then she picks the one who is most in need of her and just sticks to him like glue. And picks up a husband along the way, but even then she sends him off to war daycare. So that she can focus on Rand.
There is a little bit of just all right, I see your strategy, and it was really important, but it does feel like you sent your husband away for a while. And you were like, okay, enough of that.
Just put him on a shelf.
I'll pull him back down when I'm ready again.
Yeah, I think that was more Robert Jordan doing that.
Fair enough, yeah.
And I don't really feel like that was super in Nynaeve's character, but Robert Jordan desperately needed it for plot reasons, and Lan really needed it for character reasons, so that's what Nynaeve had to do.
I think it would have been funny if Nynaeve had gone with him.
Oh.
And was there the whole time, and he's like, what did you do? She's like, just silent. Just satisfying, just not saying a goddamn word, watching this all play out.
Oh my god.
And him being like, can you make me a gateway to the end? And her being like, nope, not gonna do it.
Oh,
you gotta ride
god.
there.
Oh my, that could be very bad for their marriage. That could be very, very bad for their marriage.
I understand why they couldn't be together, because it would be just too easy for her to just gateway them to their destination, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
She could not give him a fast travel option from where he was sitting. She had to make him go overland, so she couldn't be there.
Oh, trust me, she went overland quite a bit.
That's fair. That's fair. No, that was fair. That was I deserve that.
that was a gentle setup that I had to spike over the net.
No, I mean,
was just
Yep. You were well within your rights.
And so Rand's getting healed. Of course, they talk about the wound that will never heal, that is essentially a well of the true power, the Dark One's power, right?
Yeah. I think of it like the boar in the world, right? Because
yes.
Rand's body is the world, and there's a boar that needs patched. There's a literal
the dragon
boar
is
in his
land.
side.
Yep.
A boring into his body. It also does the whole Christ imagery thing, but I think of it as that's the boar. That's what needs to be healed. If you can heal his side, then the boar will be undone effectively.
And Shadar Logoth is also like a scar in the land, and they fight each other, totally. And their fighting helps keep the rest of us alive, even though they're both evil, right? The Rand is one. The dragon is one with the land. Rand is one with the land. I mean, it really is. It rhymes. It really should be Rand is one with the land. It's
We do call it Randland. It's a dumb name, but it's also what RJ would have wanted.
It is. Like, I actually really like that name, Randland, because of the dragon is one with the land, right? Like, it is, in a lot of ways, his body is the land, right? Like,
it is logically consistent.
Randland.
Yes.
Yeah.
It just sounds bad. I mean, it sounds good. It feels good coming off the tongue. It just sounds so dorky.
It does. It's like, what is your world? Well, we didn't really name it, so we just call it Randland. And everyone's like, oh, okay, whatever, you bunch of fucking nerds. Yeah, but that's what we're stuck with. He never gave us a continent name. He gave us Seanchan
and Shara and the Land of Madmen for some fucking reason.
And even the Blight.
The Blight. And yet, all we have are nation names.
I guess he did say Westlands.
West of technically what?
The Aiel.
Why are the Aiel the naming convention?
Well, they call it the Wetlands. Which I also, let me tell you that, I thought for the longest time, I read Wetlands as Westlands. It wasn't until I heard the audiobook that I realized my mistake. I did think it was Westland because it was west of the Aiel, and the Aiel would go wet.
That's so fair. That's so fair.
And wet and west, look, it's just an S difference. That's the only difference in those two words. So I don't think about this very often, but it's amazing how many things I discovered about the books the first time I listened to the audiobooks, because I've been reading them for years. And then you listen to the audiobooks and you realize, one, that words you had only read and never heard out loud were that word. And you're like, oh, right, that's what that word means.
Yeah. No, it is referred to as Westlands sometimes.
No, I don't think
really?
So. I don't think anywhere in the book is referred to as Westlands.
Really?
I think that's just something Robert Jordan said. Because as far as I know, never in the books is it.
Okay, because that would make sense. Because I was annoyed that would be a thing. Because I'm like, why are the Aiel's name for the world? Like, why is that? That makes no sense, given that the Aiel are mysterious as fuck.
They only call it the wetlands, right? Anywhere there's the waste and the wetlands.
Yeah.
Those are the only. That's you're Aiel or you're not Aiel. Those are the binaries of the Aiel.
Yeah. So I've always found the Westlands label very perplexing because it makes no.
The term Westlands originates from the Wheel of Time role-playing game and was subsequently used by Robert Jordan in occasional interviews.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a little canon, but it's not in the books.
Fascinating. That's a little bit of fan art creeping in, not to the true books, but the term became part of how RJ talked about it. And
the game was technically canon, right? Like the game was created, but it was licensed by Robert Jordan.
That's true.
Now it was weird because you used ter'angreal as weapons,
yeah, it's not
and
canon
it was
to
ammo,
the story
and
in any meaningful way.
No. But
that term became part of how he described the world occasionally because of that game. That is an interesting piece of lore.
That we had to pick up on something, and Westland stuck. The area that's not Seanchan and not Shara and not the Blight and not the Madlands, like, what do you call that? And Randland was popular, but then someone saw that official diagnosis was Westlands, and that became widely used. But Westlands is just so fantasy generic, right?
It's literally Western Europe without saying Europe. It's the Westlands. Very, very original. Super original.
Isn't that where the term Oriental comes from as well?
Yeah. The West is the Occident.
Right.
Right. It's the Orient and the Occident. Oriental and Occidental. Like, it's, yes. Yes, the Occident was what we would call Western Europe. It's a thing.
And the Orient
is the East. Yeah.
Is the East.
Yeah.
And so that's just saying Eastlands. Oriental is saying Eastern.
That is what that means. It does not mean soy sauce. It means East. Looking at you, ramen. Top ramen Oriental flavor, and it's just soy sauce flavor. You ever had that?
No.
Oh god! So when I was a kid, I ate a lot of top ramen, like a lot of top ramen, and for
like too
a
much.
long time, it's affordable for growing kids that have to feed themselves. But Oriental flavor was a feature for a very long time. And then sometime in the 2000s, it changed. 2000 teens. I forget when, because at that point I wasn't eating as much top ramen. But now it's soy sauce flavor, because calling it Oriental flavor is not, the greatest.
To help me out, what is the history around the word Oriental? Because I know it's not always viewed as like.
I don't know as much about it as I should, but I do know that it starts out as a geographic signifier and then becomes a slur and becomes a signifier of culture and other. But I don't know as much of the nuances of that story as it deserves to have. I don't really know that story except in the broadest of strokes. That literally once upon a time, it's like, well, we know there's people to the east, but we haven't gotten there yet because we're the Romans or whatever, and we're still trying to figure out how to replicate what that fucker Alexander did. Like, we know they're over there, but nah. But then, as along the way, it becomes quite the fucking slur in some places, and then becomes just sort of offhandedly insensitive in things like top ramen, where it's like Oriental flavor meaning soy sauce is like, But yeah, I can't tell you much more than that because it's never a rabbit hole I've fallen down.
Well, I know what I'm doing after we record.
Yeah, if you find anything interesting, tell me about it and I'll put it in the show notes.
All right.
Let me look at what chat was saying. Yes, the Roman and Chinese empires did know about each other, but I believe that the term Oriental comes from the, preliminary, like, yeah, they seem to be over there. We should probably eventually get some diplomats to not die on the trip one of these days. And they did. They did. Presumably, probably, almost definitely. Some people who were at least Roman Empire adjacent went to a Chinese court and were like, yo, we should trade and shit. And then by the time the message got back, the Roman Empire was having a bit of a kerfuffle with itself. And that never really went much of anywhere. But the Silk Road was like a whole thing. Economically speaking, the Roman and Chinese empires had a lot to do with each other. Hey, we're talking about the Roman Empire. Weekly checklist. Yes.
Damn it. Wheel of Time is my Roman Empire. My Roman Empire is not my Wheel of Time.
The Roman Empire is my Wheel of Time because the Wheel of Time is my Roman Empire. Literally, my love of history is because I was like, I know Wheel of Time well enough. I think I can take on the real world.
True. So after the whole healing thing, basically, Logain walks in.
Oh, I do want to point out that Rand has an ability to disassociate from his body here that is just superhuman. I just ignore all this pain that should have me crippled because it hurts no worse sitting than standing, which is just like, on the one hand, I understand that that's how chronic pain is sometimes, but on the other hand, like Rand, that is not a healthy mental space to be able to be in. Like, and also, I feel like this is something you've pointed to as more evidence of the body swap.
Yes.
Because Rand's dissociation from the pain in his body is part of how he's like shifting to Moradin's body. To
a different body. Yeah, he's not even necessarily feeling the pain in his body because he's almost not there anymore. Right? And I wonder how much of Moradin is absorbing that pain and feeling that pain.
Right. Because it's like, I have attempted to be like Rand and be like, I don't feel it. And it's like, that doesn't work. At least not when it's uterine pain, for sure. That just doesn't work.
I also wonder how much the warder bond does provide a bit of an anesthetic or a buffer against pain, right? We see warders doing superhuman feats while wounded, and I have to assume that there's a little bit of buffer there against just basic pain. Yeah, we do seem to see that pretty consistently, that warders' ability to keep going despite injury. Like, that can't just be, like, people's imaginations. Like, no, like the warders are genuinely operating at a higher pain threshold than everyone else. And Rand is super warder. Rand's a super duper warder. He's got 2 separate warder bonds, one of which comes with a 3-pack on the other side. To say nothing of the Moradin thing. Right. To say nothing of his own power, right? Which is, who knows how much. We know on some level channelers channeling enhances their body, right? They don't age. They don't, right? They seem to be, they can't get sick. Hardly at all. Yeah. No, that's super fair too. They are supercharged. Yeah. So Lilligin is pointing out, it's less of a not feeling the pain and more of a not spending brain space on the pain. And like, yeah, that's something that
certain kinds of pain are more amenable to that method than others.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, like, I mean, I do have some amount of chronic pain. It's not that much, but, like, I know the difference between chronic and acute pain, and I totally know what you're talking about, for sure. But also, like, I don't know. I find Rand to be superhuman on a level that I found very frustrating until Seth suggested that the body swap could take some of the load. And then I was like, I do like getting my paradoxes resolved with the other paradoxes. That is good. And then, yeah, the Warder bond is a good argument. But the body swap to me is really what takes it from irritating to, oh, this is part of how the metaphysics are being communicated.
Specifically when we see Moradin clench his hand after Rand loses his. Because it's numb, right? Because he has no feeling left in his hand, right? Like, he's feeling Rand's pain, Rand's hand, right? How much of Moradin being not that effective and not that present in these later books is because he's feeling all of Rand's pain.
That's why he tells the other Forsaken to knock it off with hurting him. That's why he's furious with Semirog, is he's like, I have to live with chronic hand pain now for the whole rest of my life. I have to deal with this numb phantom pain hand situation in a hand that is perfectly fine because of your dumbass. Like, yeah.
I don't have a lot to say about the news that we get from Logain. It's all pretty much recap.
Yeah, I pointed out in my notes that it exists, but yeah, it's really a succinct and accurate description. Logain is not spinning any of this, and he's not seriously wrong about any of it. All the information he has and all the interpretations and takes he has are all just a good summary of what we, the reader, know. So there's not much to go into.
Makes sense because he has channelers who can travel. So he gets updated real-time information as opposed to, like the White Tower and Elida, who gets garbled rumors.
Right. And also it points out that Logain is fundamentally a good person, despite the fact that, he's got a streak of darkness and it seems a little sketchy and Rand doesn't trust him. But also, we, the readers, are seeing he's not spinning the information in any particular way or biasing it or withholding information or adding and embellishing. Like, he's just giving it to Rand straight. So that tells us Logain is fundamentally a good guy.
And his noble background may help him understand some of this information, right? Like, he's...
Right, because he is asserting his nobility here, right? He comes in with a sigil and Rand goes, oh, are you doing a Mazrim Taim and, like, making up ranks? And Cadsuane steps in before Logain can explain and says, no, he was born to a noble rank. That is who he is. He is, got stripped of his titles and shit. And Logain's like, no, I got stripped of my estate. Can't take away that I am the scion of this house. That is simply what it is, which is legally debatable.
Right. Or just like, how do we, we don't have God giving people their noble status in this world. So how do people get nobility in the Wheel of Time? That's never really described what is a noble, right? It's definitely inherited, but like they don't claim divine right. They don't claim the creator made them
They tend
noble.
to claim heritage back to Arthur Hawkwing. That's generally what they seem to lean on, but there's also that whole lecture that Bashir gives to Perrin at one point about how every noble was at one point a commoner who just stepped up.
Right.
And it's like that is where a lot of nobility, like, literally has to have come from if you just think about the Divine Right of Kings being a nonsense scheme. Like, obviously, we're all the same, and just some people manage to acquire the acclamation necessary to become noble through wealth or whatever. And so, yeah, it's a little... But, it's not like he's claiming a space that other people are taking up, right? As Cadsuane points out, Logain is claiming that he's descended from people who own a little nothing scrap of land in the back country of a little nation, right? He's not claiming, like, the throne of Andor or something.
No,
so, like,
yeah.
for him to just claim a sigil, it's like, we have the contrast with Taim, right? Taim is over here inventing whatever, and Logain is saying, I'm returning to my roots. I'm going back to who I was, and I am going to lean on where I come from as a place of stability, rather than inventing something whole cloth.
Mm-hmm. And it's the difference between nobility and money, right? Or nobility and power, right? Often you see these where old families will marry new families with money, and that puts money back into the nobility and gives the elevates whoever's getting married from a commoner with money to nobility. And I see sort of the same thing where Taim really is sort of a commoner with money, in this case power, right? Trying to make himself noble. Whereas Logain really lost all his power, right? He was stilled, and he lost his titles, but he essentially has that nobility inherent in him.
Right.
Old money versus new money.
Right, yeah. And I mean, Robert Jordan really likes the idea that there are people who understand the responsibilities of the nobility towards people, right? He really leans on that with people like Elaine and even Barrowlane to an extent. Really showcasing that, like, you can be wealthy and powerful and out of touch and still have people's best interests at heart. Whether or not that's true is beside the point. That's what Robert Jordan wants us to believe. So to have Logain, again, displaying these qualities of, like, no, he is intrinsically a noble person in all of those archetypal ways.
Qualities of nobility versus being a noble.
Right. And so for Logain to in-world be like, no, I'm a noble. I have this responsibility and status. Even if I don't have the wealth, I still have the social responsibility because weird esoteric reasons. That strengthens the characterization of Logain we've got as being, like, fundamentally a good person.
Still would have loved to see Logain's POVs instead of Andral POVs.
Yes, seeing Logain take all of that creativity and gumption and trauma and becoming the magical, awesome Andral person, teaming up with Pavara in, like, a platonic way that doesn't involve weird bonding. Yes, Logain deserved what Andral got.
The more I read the Andral Pavara sections, which I love, they are very well written, but they are Sanderson writing to a core. And if you take away the special magic, the pushing the magic system to its limits, what you're left with is a story that sounds an awful lot like Logain.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Is just like, in my mind, Andral is just a version of Logain, and I'm sort of putting them together in my head.
Yeah. There's also the issue of Andral having the life experience of, like, an 80-year-old, but ostensibly only being, like, in his 30s.
Right.
This comment in chat from Vuji. The real fantasy in WoT is the amount of leaders that are competent and good-willed. Fuck! I'm screaming in American politics right now.
You've met my bosses, yeah. Or American corporation.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, yeah, the idea that those people at the top have a certain obligation to the people underneath them. And in fairness, I do think that he portrays this as a rare group of people who are stepping up in a time of crisis because Taviran and the pattern, right? Like, normally these countries are full of corrupt politicians. Kyrian, are you kidding me? The game of houses?
Yeah, Tyr and their freaking, like, ethno-caste economic system.
In a lot of ways, Andor was the exception that had a good ruler, right? That's Morghese was the exception to the rule. That's why Dylan is so on Elaine's side, is because she is used to corrupt rulers everywhere except for Morghese, and saying, listen, this family line can do it. And I know she was brought up the right way. She will be a great queen.
Right. Yeah. Andor and the Borderlands are exceptional for having generally decent rulers, but yeah, Taviran requires that lots of people step up. Yeah.
And the Borderlanders is just too practical because they're fighting a constant war, right? There's just no time for politics in the Borderlands. That's not out of, like, them being noble. That's just like, oh, fuck, I don't know. I have to go fight a battle. You do whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's the tolerance of I don't have time to police your shit.
So there's a little bit more than half the Black Towers in Aerodaman and Ilion. I sent all the men bonded with Aes Sedai except those here, as you ordered. I don't remember that at all.
I'm really happy you're having that reaction because that was how I felt reading that line. Like, wait, is this line always been here? Like, I was so confused.
What is going on there?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm confused.
Because the next thing I remember about the men in the Black Tower is they're all in the tower hanging out, and you've got the battle between Taim and Logain that's set up, right?
Yeah.
With Andril as a proxy. And like, we are there soon. And he even sets up here, right? This is the whole conversation that Logain is having, is basically saying, dude, Taim's a dark friend. He's taking over your tower. And Rand going, that's okay. You know?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So what the fuck are these Ashaman doing? Why are they in Aradoman? Why are they in Ilion? Like, are they fighting the Seanchan? What the fuck is going on here?
I don't know.
Okay, are we good? This is going to be a hell of an edit because we are pausing every 10 minutes to do some research.
Yeah, he pulls out of Aradoman later. He's about to make peace with the Seanchan now, so he's probably not fighting them currently.
Because, yeah, just like the next thing, it seems like there's a bunch of, Knife of Dreams epilogue, Pavara travel to the Black Tower to ask permission to bond.
Yeah, that feels like a really odd thread to just leave hanging.
It feels like an incredible plot hole. I can't find anything about this.
Yeah, that feels really odd.
Because just like the next time you talk to any of the Ashaman, they appear to be back in the tower.
Like they just are all out and then they all go back, but there's no mention of it?
I mean, let's put a hanger on it and see if we can find anything out, but...
That's very weird. Because we know that, like, basically all the full Ashaman are Taim's people, and everyone who's lesser rank, except for Logain, is with Logain, more or less, by the time that the conflict becomes open. But I can't think that that means that it's all full Ashaman at the tower and lower rank people out in the field. That doesn't make sense given that the conflict isn't open yet. Is Nafe a full Ashaman? I don't know. I don't think so.
No, because then he would be Logain's.
No, Sama Nasai is saying that Dahmer and Nafe are both full Ashaman.
Oh, but they're with Perrin, right?
No, neither of them are.
They're with Ram? They're not at the Black Tower.
No.
Because only full...
I bet they're with Logain right now. I bet they're part of the party that Logain just brought. But yeah, it's just such a weird statement. More than half the Black Tower is doing shit that nobody can remember in the books from Aradoman and Ilion.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Well, hopefully we find an answer to that at some point, or someone sends us an email or something.
Yeah, please let us know if you can, because we struggled with that one. That was...
embarrassing.
I sent all the men with bonded Aes Sedai except those here. Well, who's bonded Aes Sedai yet? Because we haven't gotten the Pavara group yet. These are all Elida's sisters.
Yeah. Elida plus... Well, no, because he's got the... Well, the Aiel have the ones from Dumai's Wells.
Yeah, Rand has those. No.
They become bonded later.
They just pledge to Rand.
They bond to
at this point.
Ashaman, I think, next book or something.
Mm-hmm. But we haven't gotten the two groups from the Tower and the Rebels that went and bonded
Right, because we get up to like a 50-something number at some point. With the...
Yeah, there's the 51 or 50, something like that end up getting... Because that's how many Aes Sedai have been bonded
right.
in Elida's group already. And then, so basically in return... these Tower Aes Sedai show up and get to bond 50 apprentices or soldiers, and yeah. So
anyway,
wow, that was we are on Tangent City today.
Yeah. All right, so
but yeah, I highlighted that because I was just like, I don't know, what's going on with that statement. More than half the Black Tower is in Aradoman. I sent all the men with bonded Aes Sedai except those here, as you ordered.
Yeah, I don't know. He also does, though, bring a report from Aradoman about the state of things there because they don't know where their king is and like blah 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 blah. That's also part of the news, so maybe that's part of why there's so many Ashaman there, is like he went there to see if there was like order to restore, but there just isn't because there's no one in charge. It's just gangs running around.
Right, because King Assalam is kidnapped, right? He's in the White Tower.
He's
No,
route
that's
to the White Tower and sort of
Okay.
lost on the plains of Moredo or something. He's just having like a prairie trip while the world goes to hell.
I thought we saw him arrive, right?
No, that's the Ilion King,
Oh, okay.
Matt and Stepaneos.
In Towers of Midnight, Codswain finds him and returns him to Tyr.
Yeah. She brings him back, and Rand gets a very happy reunion scene where he presents him to what's his face, Little Wolf guy.
Oh, yeah. Bashir?
No,
No.
the Napoleon dude. Ituralda.
Teralda, right. Huh. Grendel never had him. So, yeah, because Codswain doesn't say where she found him.
I believe it is that the Aes Sedai tried to steal him away like they do with Matt and Stepaneos, but just the method they used had him carefully ensconced on a road trip while all the shit hit the fan.
Right. So he just, in typical Wheel of Time fashion, because so much has happened so quickly, you can just lose a character by having them be on the road for like 3 months.
Yup.
And that's like a bunch of books.
That is my understanding of that.
Okay. I have always gotten him and Matt and Stepaneos mixed up, because they're both missing kidnapped kings who turn up later having been kidnapped by the White Tower.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, they're remarkably similar if you only think about how they exist off page. Yeah.
Right. And so, where's Matt and Stepaneos the king of?
Ilion.
Ilion? And Eredomon, which are diametrically opposed
Very
on the continent.
different
One's
places.
basically
Yeah.
One's Florida and one's Oregon, right?
Basically,
Like,
yeah. So Cadswain is sort of running interference on this. Logain is snapping at Rand, like, I'm not making this up about Taim. You need to take him seriously. And Rand's like, I have bigger fish to fry. Logain's like, how dare you? This is the biggest fish that ever needed fried. And Cadswain's like, boys, stop fighting. Otherwise, I'll spank you. Except that it's not sexy. And, like, it's just really weird. And nobody likes that in the fandom. But, like, for some reason, all the women on the page think it's hilarious. And I disagree with all of them, categorically.
yeah, no, this is the part of Codswain that I'm just like, whatever. The way she treats all the men the same, and it's just like this weird, constant challenging aspect to her that feels dumb.
It feels like it's RJ trying to do the Cadswain has to teach you and all the Ashaman something. But like I genuinely don't know what RJ thinks he's saying.
Right.
Much less do I think it's landing in a way that works for me at all. But I genuinely don't even know what he thinks he's trying to say.
I'm there with you. I'm like, I don't understand. I don't understand Codswain's goal. I don't hate her as a character. I just don't understand why he put her in there to teach that whole teaching thing.
I don't know what
doesn't
she
feel-
teaches Rand.
Yeah.
I certainly don't know what she teaches the Ashaman. Like, Min says that she will teach something to all the Ashaman. I don't know what that is.
My assumption is what ends up happening is because she introduces Rand to Tam, she's responsible for Veins of Gold, and then Rand coming down and saying Ashaman are men, right? She teaches Rand that Ashaman are men, not weapons, I think is what he's trying to imply.
I guess you're right. I have strong disagreements on like 7 different levels about why that's not what he actually wrote. But I think you might be right that is what he thinks he's writing.
Or at least what Brandon Sanderson interpreted and tried to write into the story for the end of the books.
That's also very fair. It doesn't land until the handoff. And the fact that we don't know, looking at the work as published, like that's basically all Sanderson really had to work with. Like, I mean, yeah, there were the notes and stuff, but like this is some esoteric machinations in Robert Jordan's head. I don't think
Right.
there were
I doubt
good
there was.
notes
Yeah.
for this.
No.
He was like, it's either obvious or it's not. And I don't think any of us were on his wavelength with that. Unless one of you out there in the audience was on his wavelength, in which case, please tell us.
Can I just say I really love this line talking about Taim? He tried every trick to learn where you are. Oh, he burns to know that. His eyes were practically on fire.
Yeah, loaded description. Given
Right.
book
How?
one.
Right. And the Shamael and like the whole. Is he becoming a Forsaken? I don't know. Are his eyes on fire? Is he getting Saw in them? Is he using the true power? Probably.
Yeah, what's with that analogy, Logain? Are we being literal, or is that just an analogy? What's going on?
And we get the count of 41 Dark Friend Ashaman at this point, right? With another 50 in more of his special classes. So we're seeing up to 100 people out of... I think we're looking at around 1,000 total people in the Black Tower.
That's a better ratio than the White Tower has.
Much better. A little more obvious, though.
A third versus a tenth is a pretty big difference.
Yeah. No, I don't think Tam is actually channeling the true power yet. Taim is channeling the true power yet.
It would be funny if he was, though.
It would be funny if it was, but I don't think he is. I don't think that's till later when he gets chosen. But I'm just saying that the eyes burning, it's just a figure of speech, I think, that is...
It's a big old wink there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not literal, it's an analogy, but is it?
Right. Tam built the Black Tower till it nearly matches the White Tower for numbers, so that's about 1,000.
Sure. Because the White Tower is roughly 1,000?
Yeah, at the beginning of the series, but then we've had a bunch of people die, and then we then had all the new novices and stuff.
I'm not counting
in the Rebel Tower, so I think we're probably down to like 700 or 800 at this point of full Aes Sedai.
So the Ashaman might be closer to like 500 or 600 if they're getting close to Aes Sedai numbers.
Could be 500-600, but I'd be willing to say, yeah, I don't know how many freaking Aes Sedai total there are at this point. Like that's.
I mean, they're both going to explode in numbers after the last battle because their popularity will be very high.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we do get those numbers in the notes at some point, right? Like how big each Aja is.
It's during the Dark Friend reveal.
Yeah.
In Variant's book.
Oh yeah, and then a bunch of them die during the last battle. So I don't know how many freaking Aes Sedai there are left.
Well, it's not
going to
matter because they have a zillion novices.
Right. It'll just make it easier to have actual change and culture if you have a very small number of old people left and a huge number of new people.
Oh yeah. Disruption event.
Mm-hmm. Basically, Rand goes through this whole thing about how he thinks that Logain's just jealous because he used to be the Dragon Reborn and Taim was just also claimed to be the Dragon Reborn but was shitty at it, but now he's the leader of the Black Tower and Logain's just another Ashaman. And then Logain's like, you don't think I'm jealous, you don't think I'm making all this up, and Rand's like, I don't know why you think I would think that anyway. Because yeah, that's exactly what he thinks. He totally dismisses this because he thinks Logain's jealous. And he's like, why would Taim build me up this giant group of channelers if he's a Dark Friend? Why would he do that? And Logain's like, because he's creating a Dark Friend group of channelers? Why is this hard to understand? Like... Yeah. It's
like real obvious, actually, if you think about it for 2 seconds. Yeah, it doesn't take jealousy to see the conspiracy right in front of your nose.
And I think that Rand, he says Taim and Logain were lesser problems. I think he's just so focused on the last battle and the Forsaken that he's just like, yeah, whatever, they're not important. Which is, what? Like, they're a huge weapon.
Yeah. And if Cadsuane was hammering on that being a problem, I would understand why she's tied to the Ashaman collectively. If she was like, you need to deal with this no matter how third tier it seems, you need to deal with it, then that would matter. But no, she just is Cadsuane in the corner. Instead,
she just yells at them for not being civil.
Yeah.
Which, to me, it's a very Southern lady thing, right? This idea that, like, I don't care what you do as long as you're civil while you do it.
Which is ick.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I don't like that at all. But that is very much the culture of the South, is this idea of like politeness is important. If you're stabbing someone in the back, you do it with a smile, you know?
It sounds autistic-phobic as fuck.
Yes. Yeah, bless your heart, right? The Southern way of saying you fucking moron.
I mean, that's just fun.
But the thing is, like, we've memed it a little bit, but it is just very common. All those sayings, all those little Southern niceties and everything like that have this double meaning, and oftentimes the other meaning can be quite mean.
I don't like that.
That don't move to the South.
I will not. I will live here in Oregon, where the South has come to me.
And the South, I think, is only one culture that has this priority of politeness over of niceness, and that being polite is being nice, right? I think you can say maybe like the Japanese culture might have some of that. I think there's some other places.
Well, I mean, I'd say in a lot of ways, like, the normative American culture is striving for that broadly. Like, the thing that we're all fighting against or for in whatever way. Like, that thing, I think, is that, but it is very much associated with Southern culture more than the rest of the country.
And a little bit in the Midwest. It's why people in the Midwest, they go to the coast and they're like, people are so mean here. And people are like, no, we're not. We're very nice. We're just blunt.
We're direct.
And like, we're direct. And what it is we're not polite in the way that's expected in these other cultures. And they perceive that as being mean because, again, politeness is kindness in those cultures. And if you aren't polite, you're not kind. And therefore you are mean. And so that's why you get the people from the Midwest and South coming out to these cities being like, why is everyone so mean here? And everyone's like, what? What do you mean mean? It's what they're saying is people aren't being polite. Right.
Even though actual kindness is not about the words you say at all.
No, not at all. And if you look in cities, people are often much more generous than in rural areas.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Oregon Direct. Oregon Direct is great. What is also great is Varen breaking in as Rand is about to fire Cadswain. Varen smoothly steps in and is like, oh, by the way, random Brown stumbling through. Don't mind me. Haha. And she just says some random stuff. And her knitting is a shapeless lump that might have been anything sitting in her lap. And later on, she blinks and then looks at her knitting again, frowning at it as though she, too, were unsure what it was going to be. Like, which totally reminds me of how she does compulsion, right? When she does her compulsion, at first, it looks like a tangled mess. And then she pulls two things and it collapses into a different tangle. And then she pulls two more things and it collapses into a perfect pattern and poofs into its finished form. And it's just like she's doing that but with her knitting because she's setting up a whole bunch of shit right now. She's setting up so much stuff. She leaves in this chapter. She leaves in this chapter. This is when she starts dropping fucking letters with the drop of red wax. Like, this is the beginning of the end for Varen. This is Varen heading out on her final escape velocity that will land her at Matt and then at Egwene. Like, this is the last time she's with Rand.
What sets her in motion then?
I don't know. I'm so confused. We're going to talk about it when we get there in another page / 1,000 hours. Rand asks Cadswain what she thinks of his truce with the Seanchan. She criticizes him for not asking her earlier, which is fair, I think. It is weird to bring your advisor in at the very last minute.
But also, she doesn't offer any advice until he asks, right? Which means she's mostly been sitting there saying nothing.
It's been... Neither of them is behaving ideally. We have a little tangent of tantrum with Min about how, like, we're not going to let you die because willpower and the power of love and swelling music, climax music, and, you know, like, that whole thing. And then Cadswain's like, no, just shut up. You're not helping. I'm going to tell you that your unpopular plan is going to be unpopular. And the leopards that say they're going to eat your face are, in fact, going to eat your face. And Rand's like, literally don't care. Great advice. Good chat. Anyway.
I have a theory that this is one of Varen's flicker moments.
Oh.
that when the Ogier arrive, she has to leave. And that in her flicker, this is one of those things where she's like, you know what? I think I need to go. This is the trigger for me to go do the rest of what I want to do.
Wow. I like that there's just something about the arrival of the Ogier, Logain standing there, the rain coming down, holding the knitting. Like, there's just something about that scene that she got from Flicker. And when the Ogier arrive, it all catalyzes. And she's like, oh shit, I know what I gotta do.
Because remember, she's heading to Tarvalon. Taviran pulls her out and she ends up dealing with all the Matt stuff, right? But she was on her way to Tarvalon to turn over the book and commit suicide.
Well, and what she does on the way is she leaves a bunch of different notes with different people. Like, she leaves a note that ends up with Alana getting captured and taken to Shale Ghul. She leaves a note with Rand. I think someone else gets a note too. I mean, Matt and Egwene both see the same style note. Like, oh no, yeah, the one that Matt holds on to forever and ever. Like,
right.
She goes I think she goes to her room and writes all those notes and then starts dropping them. Like, that's what she does when she leaves this room. Is she goes and she writes a bunch of notes. She leaves one with Ethan to bring to Rand as soon as the attack is over. She slips out right before / during the attack, I think, is when she just gateways out. And just, oh my god, yeah. And she's on her trajectory towards Tarvalon she wants to unbind herself she wants to find the Oath Rod and unbind herself and see if that would work. But she is, prepared to kill herself to give that information over. As of this chapter, she knows that that's what she's doing.
Although, listening to you, Occam's razor, she's a dark friend. She knows the attack is coming and she's getting out beforehand.
Yeah, but she leaves the note with that red wax for Rand, and we see that same note with Alana that leads to her presumably getting Dark Friend captured, and we see her give it to Matt. So it's like, it's not just that. It's not just like self-preservation ducking out. Like, there's something about initiating her final tumble towards Tarvalon that happens here. And there's nothing that I can think of other than a flicker thing that just is like, oh, this is the time and I got to do some dark friendery to like make it work. Maybe she knows the attack is coming, but that's not the only reason she leaves. Because I agree, it does seem like the dark friend Aes Sedai, who ducks out right before a giant battle, probably knew it was coming. That does seem
yeah. The timing of it probably has more to do with the battle, but why she writes the notes, why she goes on this quest, why she's initiating her final plan. I don't see a trigger for that necessarily.
Other than the Ogier arriving.
Right.
Which has nothing to do with anything unless there's some weird flicker thing. Yeah, but it feels momentous even though we don't know what the trigger is. Something momentous happens in her head. But yeah, so Rand tells Cadsuane about how he went through the redstone doorframe and these are the answers he got, or this is the answer he got that's relevant to the question of why are you making peace with the Seanchan even though literally everyone will hate it? Why are you doing it? And he says, well, I interpreted this really vague prophecy in one very specific way, and clearly that's the only answer. And she just kind of blinks at him like, you are a child.
Also, he doesn't give the whole answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because what he says is the north and the east must be as one, the west and the south must be as one, the two must be as one. The rest of the answer is to live, you must die. Because he asks, how can I win the last battle and live? And so to live, you must die. Which is interesting considering all of this constantly references back the crossing of the streams, to live you must die, the fact that he can move sideways to this other body and touch it, right? Like, so much of this chapter is outlining the body swap. This chapter is, the body swap is going to happen, here are all the things that are set up in order for the body swap to happen. To live you must die. It's unsaid, but the fact that it's unsaid is emphasizing it that much more. Conspicuous absence of to live you must die. talking about the crossing of the streams, bringing that back up, talking about the effect, talking about that effect, talking about how the dizziness is this thing that's been escalating till the point where all of a sudden there's no dizziness, there's clarity, right? Like, because they are no longer not in sync, they're in sync, they're just crossed.
But he doesn't get that. He's just like, I gotta make a truce with the Seanchan, and if I can't make a truce with them, I'll smash them into smithereens. And I'm about to meet the daughter of the Nine Moons, so all I have to do is figure out how to bind her to me. And it's like, we're sitting there going, she has to marry Matt. That's how you get bound to her. It's really simple, actually.
Yeah, she's already halfway there.
Yeah, like by the time that you meet her, if for realsies, she'll be bound to you via said marriage. She'll have finished the ceremony.
And I love him being like, oh yeah, I just had this vision of Matt and some dark-skinned woman who I don't really give a shit about. If only I could find the daughter of the Nine Moons.
Right. Yeah.
It was just the irony in that of like, you the pattern's giving her to you. You see her every time you hear Matt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then we get this whole the stones crack, right? Basically, the harder you are, the more brittle you are statement that from Codswain. Stone cracks from a hard enough blow. Steel shatters. The oak fights the wind and breaks. The willow bends where it must and survives. And then, so basically, and then Rand says, a willow won't survive Tarmangaiden, basically saying...
And I'm like, you think an oak will?
Oak will, right, yeah.
Like, why wouldn't a willow survive? Like, this is metaphysics, dude. Like, maybe being bendy is how you survive. Like, you have no idea that strongness and brittleness are actually the qualities you need to win a metaphysics battle. Like, come on now.
But he thinks they are.
Like, and literally all the trees are getting fucked over by, what do the Aiel call him? Leaf blighter? Like, that's not a willow versus oak distinction.
But yeah, just continuing on that pattern of him turning himself into Quendiar and how that's bad, and just harping on that a little bit.
It's frustrating.
Then we find out that the Ogier who have arrived are Loial's mother and Elder Hammon and Aerith.
And Loial squeaks in response, which
Yep.
is just the cutest possible word choice. My mother, Loial squeaked. It's so cute.
And Loial's relationship with Aerith has to be one of the most pure forms of Robert Jordan saying men and women apart are ineffective and men and women working together are extremely effective.
Totally.
And I think a lot of people read the beginning of Robert Jordan's book where he's showing that men and women apart are ineffective and go, why does he hate men and women so much? Why does he create these differences? Why does he say women are from Venus and men are from Mars? And I have to be like, because that's where you start the journey and you show how bad things are. And then you show them working together and realize those fears are unfounded and that things are better off when men and women are working together. And that's the conclusion. And Loial, who has fled and run and is terrified of Aerith and is so worried about his book and his status and how he's going to be held down and unable to do anything, gets married, and she turns around and goes, stop harassing my fucking husband. Let him do what he wants.
Yeah, it's yeah.
And he goes, oh, this is better than being single and fighting on your own. You have support. You have help. You have someone to be there with you. That is better. And like Roberts Jordan is basically writing a pro-marriage book here, right? Like everybody, I mean, in a lot of ways, like everybody gets married. Everybody pairs off.
Yeah, no, he's terrible at writing romance, but he is solidly like on team stronger together. Marriage is good for you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like, which is not something you can say for like, what, fucking Lord of the Rings? Like nobody's pairing off in that. There's not enough women for people to pair off. Well, and we could say the hobbits are pairing off. But that's a whole other.
Well, actually, I don't know. I haven't read the books in so long. I have no idea if people pair off or not.
I think the pairing off we see is much more evident in the movies than it is in the books.
Sure. But I'm just saying, a lot of people died, and you're going to need to replace them somehow.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love the Loial being together with Aerith being a better thing than them being apart is one of my favorite stories about men and women working better together.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Sarah Scribbles comic I saw recently about getting to your 30s, where it's like you get told your whole life, like, oh, like, enjoy your life before you turn 30 because your life's basically over after that. And then you get to your 30s and you open the door to your 30s and it's just all rainbows and kittens. And it's like, wait. Because, like, that has been my experience of getting to my 30s is like, oh, this is so much better. This is so much better. This is so much better. Why would anyone want to stay in their 20s? Ew, gross.
And my 40s are better than my 30s.
Yeah, right. And people say that about each successive decade, and it's just like, but when you're growing up, it's just like, well, yeah. I mean, adults are just all the same, and there's no like everything interesting happens when you're young. I was like, no. But it's the same thing. This Loial is just like, no, like my life is over once I'm married, and it's like, no, sir. Your life is gearing the fuck up. Things are happening now.
Every so often, he moans sadly, half under his breath, "My book."
No, my book.
book.
She is going to be your number one cheerleader, first person in the acknowledgments. Like, shut up. You're going to dedicate every book to Harriet.
All right. She'll be your fucking editor,
right?
all right? Like,
Exactly. Literally.
No, this is where we say, like, there's a lot of meta with Loial and Jordan and Aerith and Harriet. And
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think I'm just going to, that's the readout.
Yeah, we finally made it to the end. I'm so proud of us.
Actually, do you want to do the readout here? Because it's like mostly Varen and Nynaeve.
Sure.
And I know you like to read Varen.
I do love to read Varen because these lines are so loaded when you know where she's going next, like immediately and long term. Like these lines are just so loaded.
Does Nynaeve send Lan off? The next thing she does is send Lan off. So like we have Varen going off to basically give the names to Egwene, and we have Nynaeve ready to send Lan off to the last battle.
Well, and also she sets up Matt to sets up Talmanes effectively to save Caemlyn, kind of, sort of.
Sure. Yeah. Although I think that does happen later. I think Varen gets information for that letter later on.
Well, but she delivers it before she gets to Egwene.
Okay. Yes.
It's in between here and there is when that happens. It's part of why she keeps getting yoinked into the mountains to talk to him.
But in a lot of ways, Nynaeve is starting the last battle here.
Oh my God, she is. And in 2 chapters, the Golden Flint Crane is going to fly for Tarmangaiden. In literally 2 chapters. Yep.
And she lights the fuse. Yeah, the time it takes Lan to ride across the borderlands is the fuse to when the last battle starts.
And the reason why Lan gets antsy in his pantsy is because of the attack of the next chapter. After Death Gates, Lan is looking out the window going, that was really close, and that was just a taste of Tarmangaiden. I need to be in the borderlands protecting my homeland from what is happening. Like, it's all about to start rolling downhill. It's all about to start.
You might be able to claim that Death Gates is the initial blow of the last battle. Right, in the way that the assassination of Francis Ferdinand was the beginning of World War I, right?
Yeah.
Like this attack is sort of the blow that leads to the response that leads to the beginning of the last battle.
Yeah. So this is the last chapter. This is the last readout. This is the last moment before the opening rumbles of the last battle really start to pop off. So
yeah, we're really at that inflection point where everything from here on out is the last battle has kind of, the fuse is lit and we're ready for that. We're watching that fuse go.
And Nynaeve says a storm's coming. Rand says, "Ooh, how soon?" And the answer is the part where she said that. There you go.
Yeah.
So yes, I would love to read this section.
Okay, then I will let you read that.
Well, Varen said, holding up her knitting for inspection, I believe I have done all that I can here. I think I'll go find Tomas. The rain makes his knee ache, though he denies it even to me. She glanced at the window. It does seem to be slowing. And I think I'll go find Lan, Nynaeve said, gathering her skirts. The company is better where he is. That, with a sharp tug on her braid and a glare divided between Olivia and Logain. The wind tells me a storm is coming, Rand. And you know I don't mean rain. The last battle? Rand asked. How soon? When it came to weather, listening to the wind could sometimes tell her when the rains would come to the hour. It may be And I don't know. Just remember, a storm is coming. A terrible storm. Overhead, thunder rolled. Ah, Robert Jordan.
A storm is coming. Yeah, that's The Gathering Storm, right? The next book.
Oh, yeah. It's like, it's not the last battle proper, but it is the orchestra tuning up. It is the opening band coming out for their set. It is...
The fuse burning.
Yeah, the fuse burning. This is not the bomb. This is the fuse. Oh, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. I'm so excited. We're doing Death Gates next week. We're doing Golden Crane the week after that. Like, shit is popping off.
And I love that. I think I've done all that I can here, right?
Varen.
She's like, set up.
Varen.
She's like, Codswain's got it. I'm going to go find Thomas.
We're out.
The rain, I feel like the whole thing with the rain is an analog for, like, the storm. It's like, the rain is slacking briefly. This is the calm before the storm.
She's like, I'm going to duck out now while I have a chance to go do better elsewhere. I've done what I can here. You're good with Cadswain. I'm seeing it all working out, even though I literally just intervened to keep you from firing her. But regardless, I gotta go. I got other things that will be more helpful to do. Oh, Varen.
And with that, I am amped. I am amped up.
Fantastic.
Fan-fucking-tastic. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And a huge thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon, who shows up live, who gives us messages of support, and who has supported us in the past. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Can't believe we're here.
So much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. A recording in progress.
I mean, we're all recordings in progress. I don't...
My mom's an actual, like, recorded musician, so, like, that's one of those insults that's just like, yes, correct. She is literally a content creator. That is a thing. Pants, it just means that putting your mom in front of something is really funny. Just period.
This may take several minutes to install. Depending on your definition of several, that might be true.
Right. And with this computer in particular, it's never the several that I want to be true. It's never that several. It's always like severals.
I can finish any task in seconds. Just not going to tell you how many seconds.
Well, technically, my life is numbered in
exactly.
seconds, so, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
The universe is only seconds old. Very true.
This is true. This is true.
So,
only nanoseconds old if you really want to get pedantic about it.
It's picoseconds. Femtoseconds.
What is it? A plank? Is that the shortest?
A plank.
Length? Second?
Yeah, I would guess a plank.
I think a plank, it's just a plank. Right?
Yeah, it's a plank amount of time. Well, because you can have a plank length.
Yeah, so I guess a plank length of time should also be a thing.
Because it just converts with the speed of light, right? It's a Planck length, how far you can travel, basically how long it takes to travel a Planck length at the speed of light. That's a Planck second, a Planck time, yeah.
So, yeah, that's got to be about as small of a division of time as we've got mathematically.
I mean, as far as we can, well, not mathematically, physically, yes.
Yeah, I guess I don't know which medium I'm trying to speak in.
Right, because mathematically you can keep going smaller and I mean, we can make numbers much smaller.
Well, do we have a unit name for that, though? Like, at some point we run out of prefixes for second, right?
We've made a lot of those. I'm sure somewhere there's an archive that goes down way below what actual Planck time would be. You know, if you just say, 10 to the minus 3,000 seconds. I bet there's some, the 10 to the minus Google, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a number.
Yeah. I thought it was goggle, but...
Yeah, you're right. It is, but
But Saba Nasai says plank time is 5.39 times 10 to the negative 44.
Seconds.
That is real short. That's real short. So yeah, I guess mathematically there is such a thing as infinity, but that seems like pretty close to the limit of what would matter physically, even for like cosmology and shit. That seems pretty relevant.
I mean, it is by definition the smallest thing that matters physically.
Yeah.
Anything's like, yeah. Well, because have you ever heard physicists talk about virtual particles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in empty space, you can have particles that pop in and out of existence, and it's okay as long as they exist less than the Planck time and move less than the Planck length.
Right, yeah.
And it's this weird thing of like, but that doesn't actually happen. Like they're like, no, physically, as far as we can tell, in order to make our math work, there are all these particles popping in and out of existence constantly in empty space and existing for less than Planck time.
Yeah. No, I watched a video about this from MIT.
Sure.
This is really cool old guy with a varying style of mustache that likes to explain physics in these like really like explain it like I'm 5 but also a grad student kind of things,
which is
really fun.
Explain it like I'm 5 or a grad student is about the same level of explanation.
Right. And he always ends his videos with, and remember, physics is everything. It's like his tagline. He's such a fucking dad. It's like the most adorable thing. But yeah, virtual particles I think was the last video of his that I watched, and I was just like, what
is that? Arvin Ash?
No, it's Dawn something. I'll put a link in the show notes. I can't remember right now, but it will be in the episode description, and I'll post it in Discord when I get to that.
Because I've definitely heard that tagline from someone. I'm just trying to remember which YouTube channel I watch. Yeah,
it's either CERN or MIT, or I think it's MIT. But anyway.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
It's Dawn something.
Yep.
Yeah. But he's really cool. He explains really high level concepts without dumbing it down, which sometimes means that I'm not following. But also it's simple enough that I'm getting the general idea. Like, because there's enough visual aids. Like, yeah, I'll put a link to his virtual particles video in the description. Because, yeah, I didn't really know about them. And then I watched that like within the last month. So, I do know what they are.
That and PBS Space Time, which you should also link to. Fantastic YouTube channel. I've binged all of that stuff, and really I can't recommend it highly enough. I watch that stuff. If you have any interest in physics, I think he does a great job of writing and then conveying that writing in a way that makes sense.
I love all the PBS stuff on YouTube. Like, it's one of the broad umbrellas of things that's just on all constant. I'm always watching something from some PBS science subdivision because they're all so good.
And I mean, I love the biology and the earth science and all that kind of stuff, but space time, man, the space time one, it's science, it's math, it's basically like reading a science fiction novel, only it's real.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's good stuff.
Yeah, Vertasium has gotten a little clickbaity lately, I gotta say.
Yeah, it's a little too algorithm chasey.
Yeah, his stuff on the whole speed of he got in this big debate about how fast is power, and like that power doesn't move over lines like you think it does, and this thing about fields, and people basically being like, okay, you've taken technically true to the point where you're saying other things that are also technically true are lies. Right? Like, he got to this point where he's like, okay, here's another model you can use with electricity. And I was like, okay, that's fair. You know, it's a little bit harder conceptually to get with. And he said, and therefore the model you've been using your whole life is a lie. And I was like, and I went, no, it's not. They're both valid. Like, we have two very valid models, and
they're models.
Yeah, they're
models.
They're models. Yeah, and that whole, and then he got a different result with his model, but it's because he misunderstood he like overcomplicated his model, right? And then got a bad result because it was overcomplicated in the area that he was trying for. Anyway, Vertasium is one of those guys where he took some really interesting stuff early on in his history, and now I feel like he's really reaching to be as clever and interesting, and he's going with ideas that aren't necessarily as solid to chase the algorithm.
Yeah, it's a struggle to come up with new content, which is not a thing we would know about thanks to Robert Jordan doing that work for us.
But no, I mean, you and I have tried to create content outside of the Wheel of Time, and it's had mixed results. It's hard to create content outside of something that's already within our...
Yeah, Hot Nuance is doing fine with that aside from scheduling. Just hard. But yeah, it's a struggle to find something that hits the right mix of like already existing and yet needing you to comment on it.
Yep.
Like that's a very specific ratio you need, and if there's too much of one or the other, then it just doesn't. We have multiple projects that haven't worked, and I think that's why. It's one or the other of those things was not there.
And then you combine that with or you do news, which is a whole different churn on looking at new things, forming opinions on it, and getting out while it's still relevant.
Right, and that's chasing a different algorithm with different mechanics, and I don't want to chase an algorithm. I want to chase my weird people. I want to flock with my weird people off on the side.
And honestly, our worst content is when we chase the algorithm.
Oh, for sure. For sure. We've barely ever tried it, and we immediately hated it and didn't have it perform well. It was like the most rapid feedback loop ever. Like, yeah, no, let's not. That gave us 0 rewards.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?